Here's what you need to know before you buy or build a greenhouse. I'm Natalie Lucier from Waykeeper Farm and Nerdery, and I have been obsessed with greenhouses for quite a while. Our very first greenhouse was completely built ourselves. It was in our backyard on a concrete slab. It was built just square with wood, and we put plastic tarp on it. And every time it rained, we had to go out there with a broom and try to get the water off the roof, and we ended up getting leaks and all kinds of issues with that build-it-yourself type greenhouse. So when we moved to a farm, I knew that I really wanted to invest in a real deal, solid greenhouse that would withstand the winter, the wind, the snow, and all of the elements. So if you're thinking of getting a greenhouse, here's what you need to consider. First of all, think about your goals with your greenhouse. Are you using it to start seeds? Are you using it to extend your season so you can start your plants earlier, or maybe extend them later on? What kinds of plants are you planning to grow? Are you doing tomatoes and peppers and other hot things, or are you using it more in the winter to do four-season gardening, like green leafy vegetables that you can pick out in January or December? Do you want to do plant propagation and split plants into multiple plants, or start trees from branches and cuttings? Those are all types of things you'll want to consider because it will tell you how big and what kind of greenhouse you want to have. You might also want your greenhouse to be a place where you can hang out or work or have your kids play when it's really cold outside, because those are definitely things that I considered with how big of a greenhouse we decided to go for. Then you'll want to decide what kind of a greenhouse do you want to build. Is it going to be a DIY greenhouse using found resources, like maybe on the side of the road you found a kit that somebody was throwing out or removing from their old farm, or maybe you find some windows that someone is throwing away? Those are all amazing resources you can use to build a greenhouse. You can also use plastic and other things that are pretty cheap and easy to find. You can also get kits just for the frame and then cover it yourself. There are so many options when it comes to building your own greenhouse kits, and I highly recommend doing that as a first step if you don't have the budget, or if you want to just check out if you're actually going to use a greenhouse or not. Now, the type of material that you cover your greenhouse with is going to depend on your climate and your goals again. So if you are looking for season extension, or you really want to grow hothouse vegetables in the summer, then you'll definitely want to look at a polytunnel, which tends to be a little bit less expensive, but it also doesn't hold up as well to the elements and will probably freeze a little bit earlier. And so those tend to be great. You can roll up the sides. Usually there's a lot more options to those, and they can be a little bit easier to build and get set up too. You might have also seen beautiful Victorian glass greenhouses from olden times, and glass is a great greenhouse material, but there are some drawbacks too. So it can break, that's unfortunate, but also it is a little bit colder because the glass does not actually insulate as much as other materials that are out there. So it does have drawbacks. It can be extremely beautiful, and if you use found glass or other ways, it can be very environmentally friendly too. We ended up going with polycarbonate, so that's what you'll see in our greenhouse panels. They are twin wall, which means that there's a little bit of air in between two pieces of essentially plastic, and what that means is that it gives it a little bit more insulation to the greenhouse, and so it lets the sun come into the greenhouse and kind of keeps it a little bit longer in that greenhouse, which keeps the temperatures a little bit more smooth. Now, a lot of people ask me what kit we're using or where did we buy our greenhouse. So it is from Planta Greenhouses, and I'll put a link below. And the reason we ended up going with this company and these types of kits is because they're very, very sturdy, and that's great for snow and wind, which we have both of here in our farm in southern Ontario. And what we found is that it has so far withstood the wind, and we've yet to get snow, so I'll definitely keep you up to date on how that goes. Another important consideration for your greenhouse is what kind of flooring or earth material you're going to use. So in our greenhouse, we have a climate battery, which I'm going to explain in a whole other video and really walk you through that whole setup. But for us, it was really important to be able to plant in ground and to have beds that were actually connected to the soil, so we could really connect to that plant microbiology and all of the good fungi, bacteria, and all the stuff that happens in the soil life. And that's because in our previous greenhouse, it was built on a concrete slab, and we really didn't do that well with the plants that we had in there. We were actually using it for aquaponics, and if that's a topic that interests you, we definitely got a ton of fish and amazing results from our aquaponics system. But for this particular greenhouse, we wanted to be able to plant in ground and just have that connection to the soil. And another benefit of having a greenhouse like this is that you can definitely definitely do more vertical growing and vertical planting. So you can see we definitely have things that are growing up and tied up. So I will show you in another video how we do that and what we've got planted in here. Another really important consideration for your greenhouse is whether you're going to bring electricity into it and how you're going to water it. So in our case, we decided to have electricity run from our house to our greenhouse, which wasn't too far. So, where you place your greenhouse is really, really important because of all of these considerations. And you also have to think about the sun and, whether you're gonna have enough sun in the winter, especially to keep the greenhouse warm if that's what you're going for. And maybe if you can get shade in the summer, that would be a bonus too. So those are all really important considerations for where you put your greenhouse. And then also if you are able to bring electricity out to it, that can inform a lot. Are you going to actually be heating your greenhouse with external energy? Are you using something else to heat it? There are so many amazing options that we're trying out and exploring. This is going to be our first winter with the greenhouse up and running, and we'll definitely be tracking and letting you know how it goes. Now, when it comes to watering, we decided to just water with a hose this year. It was not practical, especially in the heat of the summer where the greenhouse could get higher than 50 degrees Celsius, and that meant we had to water sometimes twice a day if it was super, super hot and dry like that. So I don't think it's the ideal scenario. We're probably going to be setting up some sort of sprinkler or drip irrigation, but since it was our first season, we want to just go ahead and try it and see what happened. And then over time, I also think there are ways to use rainwater capturing and using that with maybe a pump to get more of the sprinkler or watering action happening with found water so that we're not using extra resources that way. Now let's talk about the size of the greenhouse that you'll go with. So we went all out after having a really small greenhouse at our old home that was in the suburbs. We decided to buy a farm, move to a farm, and get a commercial sized greenhouse. And part of that was because we were moving from Texas to Southern Ontario, Canada. And I was like, if I'm moving to a cold place, then I need a good greenhouse. And so this is why we ended up with this 100-foot by 30 feet commercial sized greenhouse. Obviously, this is not the way everyone is gonna go. And everything I read and who I talked to who had a greenhouse, they basically said, get the biggest greenhouse you can afford. And so that's what we did. We just pulled out all the stops and decided to get the biggest greenhouse that we could get. And it has been amazing to have so much space and to not feel crunched on space or like I can't fit certain things in. I've been able to do a lot of great succession planting, and we even have some permanent plants in place. So we have fig trees and we have pomegranate trees, and we also have tea plants and some olive trees as well. So that's just kind of our first year, the beginning of what we're going to be planting in a more permanent way here. But I feel like that's possible when you have a big enough space, and that is a really cool way to kind of grow some semi-tropical plants and semi-tropical trees in your region. So like I said, you might want to start smaller, you might want to go big if you can, and it really comes down to, what are your goals? So for us, our goals are really to grow a lot of food and to really not depend as much on the grocery store and to be able to have fresh produce available just outside our house. And so we also really want to use this space in the winter to have our kids play when it's not really nice outside, but it's still warm in here. And I also do tend to come in here and write every now and then for my other business. And so these are the types of things that you want to consider when you're making the investment in a greenhouse. Now, if you enjoyed talking about greenhouses and you want more greenhouse content, make sure to watch my greenhouse tour video right now.